the Wealth Report 2025, the Taxed Generation by Multipolitan, looked at 164 jurisdictions around the world.
And only one city ranked in the top 5 for tax favorability, wealth preservation, and future readiness. Drum roll, please. Starts with an S, ends with an E. Singapore!
Hey.
That's a powerful reminder that wealth now flows not to the cheapest places, but to the most predictable. So let's unpack why Singapore stands alone and what this means for the future of global wealth. We are joined by the co-founder and CEO of Multipolitan, Nirbhay Handa. Nirbhay, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me today.
Thank you for coming on. First, tell us a little bit about what you do at Multipolitan, how you kickstarted it. What was the genesis of this organization?
Yeah, so essentially my background is I worked for a business called Henley & Partners. I was their group head of business development. And, that business specialized in, helping governments design sovereign innovation tools that can bring in FDI, particularly programs like residence by investment programs. I was very young and I kind of reached a place where the only way I could have longevity to my career was to become an entrepreneur. I had a fairly accelerated progression and then decided to combine technology and immigration and build Multipolitan. So the business is co-founded by me and my co-founder. His name is Lee John Smith. He exited his last startup called Paydi in Japan for $2.7 billion. So he's a unicorn founder. And we're productizing how people move around the world.
What does Multipolitan mean, actually?
So, it's a smart take on metropolitan. So, for example, you and I, we were just chatting. Your family comes from Islamabad. You live in Singapore.
Yep.
So you are a Multipolitan, right?
Oh.
And I am a Multipolitan. I was born in rural Rajasthan. I live in Singapore now and run businesses all over the world. So it gives you the power.
Audrey, from tomorrow, you don't call me Emaad, you call me Mr. Multipolitan.
I shall. Don't dare me, I will do it. Okay, so now the big spotlight nearby is Multipolitan's latest study, the Wealth Report 2025, called the Taxed Generation. So before we dive into the findings, tell us why it's called the Taxed Generation.
Yeah, we feel that we are living in an era where wealth is not only created, but also defended. We've kind of seen that with what's happening in the West, particularly UK abolishing resident non-dom tax. France is speaking about Zoekman tax, which is a wealth tax. Netherlands is having conversations around exit tax as well. So as a result of that, for high net worth individuals and family offices, geography has become the ultimate wealth preservation strategy. So the old question was, what do you make? But the new question is becoming, what do you keep? And that's why the report is called the tax generation. And we feel that we are the tax generation living in these times.
All right. So we know that Singapore was the only city worldwide to place in the top 5 for all 3 of your indices. First of all, is that a surprise at all? Because when you say the words wealth report, Singapore being in the top few, it's not that surprising, but let's dive a little bit deeper into that. Tell us about the 3 lenses that you guys used and why you think Singapore came up on top.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we asked 3 questions. Where is currently capital safest from rising tax pressure? Number 1. The number 2 question was, which cities have preserved wealth through a decade of disruption, last 10 years? And the final question was, what it's going to take to create longevity and legacy around your wealth in the future. And we used 3 indices to answer that question. The first is the Tax-Friendly Cities Index. So this is not rating countries on the basis of low headline tax. What it does is we obviously look at different types of taxes, from your corporate tax to your property tax to your wealth tax. And then we look at things like double taxation agreements. So what that means is, as an investor, you're not taxed twice. The more number of treaties you have, the better placed you are as a country. And the final indicator that we looked at is all of this means very little if you don't have stable governance. So combining these 3 factors, we come up with the Tax-Friendly Cities Index. Singapore does not have low headline tax. There are places in the world with much lower headline tax. But what Singapore offers is that fiscal intelligence and prudence that investors are looking for. And as you said, that predictability that investors are seeking in times like these.
So how did other cities fare in this wealth report? Were they lagging far behind Singapore? What were they lacking, if at all?
So, the 3 indices are starkly different from each other. So the rankings are also very different. So on the Tax-Friendly Cities Index, Abu Dhabi was ranked number 1. Dubai was ranked number 2. Singapore was ranked number 3. Very interesting. There's 7 cities amongst top 20 in the Middle East. What that means is, Middle East is becoming an epicenter for wealth preservation. And it's not just low headline tax. If you look at places like ADGM, Abu Dhabi Global Markets, DIFC, they have indeed become very visible in the international asset management space because of the regulatory clarity they provide. So while Abu Dhabi and UAE, Dubai, they have low headline tax, they also have stable governance now, which they've really worked on in the last 10, 15 years. So as a result of that, Abu Dhabi was ranked number 1, Dubai was ranked number 2, and Singapore was ranked number 3 on the tax-friendly cities index.
Okay. Well, we covered the Middle East and, of course, Singapore, but the report actually covers 164 jurisdictions, which is no small sample size. When you looked across all of these markets, what trends or surprises kind of stood out to you in how families and entrepreneurs manage their wealth today?
Yeah, very interesting. So, I'm a millennial. So firstly, what we're seeing is there's a huge intergenerational wealth transfer from boomers to Gen Z and millennials. And the way millennials look at wealth is starkly different from boomers. Millennials and Gen Z, they tend to be more transnational, as I said, multipolitan. And the other piece is, we're now living in a multipolar world. So you have BRICS and you have G7. So let's say if you're a BRICS entrepreneur and you want access to G7, maybe it's a good idea for you to seek an alternative residence in a G7 country because capital and mobility are confined within these multipolar blocks. The other piece is Singapore is obviously, we live in Singapore. We should be very grateful, but I have colleagues who live in places like Tel Aviv and Lebanon. And if you live in places like these, the utility of an alternative residence is a lot higher than you owning a car. There are almost 60 active global conflicts that are taking place. The fourth piece is, historically, wealth stayed in a country where it was made. But now wealth is seeking places where it gets neutrality, where it gets stable governance, where it gets fiscal prudence. And that's where Singapore has become really the epicenter for the conversation around wealth preservation.
Yeah, a big pull factor for Singapore in terms of wealth migration is their ability to attract families and single-family offices from India, the UK, Southeast Asia. What kind of impact does that have on the local entrepreneurial system?
I think it's extremely good because now family offices are also acting like centers of innovation. What that means is, let's say if you're an heir of a family office and you're personally interested in a certain type of industry, you can drive that family office to offer venture capital and private equity. So it's exceptional for the startup ecosystem in Singapore attracting wealth from these countries.
But of course, with this kind of wealth migration, there are concerns about widening inequality here, right? So how should, the socially conscious entrepreneurs, the family businesses, balance their drive for growth with contributing positive to society?
Yeah, I think I would like to answer that question in two parts. Why are we seeing wealth migration out of the West right now? Particularly if we're looking at a lot of families in the UK are moving to UAE. They want to move to Singapore, but Singapore is essentially more catered to ultra high net worth individuals, whereas Dubai is a little bit more accessible for people in the affluent segment because, their ability to take many people in because of, it's a large state and they plan to increase their population drastically. So what we're seeing is that, entrepreneurship, particularly when you have startup entrepreneurs coming, it leads to a lot of job creation. And that's the most important social benefit you can create. What entrepreneurs can do personally is, ESOPs, they are a big tool for creating wealth for your employees. So entrepreneurs can consider offering ESOPs in their business. So it's not just them who are making wealth on an exit, it's their entire team. And secondly, they can tie their exits to a social cause that they personally prefer, whether that could be climate action or it could be anything of their personal interest. And I think these could be a couple of ways where how entrepreneurs can contribute socially.
Singapore is also not immune to geopolitical volatility. It's a small country still heavily dependent on global partners for trade and other things. So things like tariffs, regulatory changes may hinder entrepreneurs in terms of their decision to move wealth here. Where do you stand on that?
Well, Singapore ranks very highly on neutrality, and I think neutrality is the biggest asset class in this world. So if there's one place they're able to really take a bet on, it has to be Singapore out of all the other places around the world. So, it's a relative comparison with these things, and I think Singapore is very well placed.
All right. So I believe that this is your third wealth report by Multipolitan. Do you remember how Singapore fared in last year's wealth report? Is there a big shift in any of the different countries? Do you see like a huge drop or a huge rise for certain places?
I think Singapore did really well. The last report was called The Futures on Chain, and it really spoke about, integrating blockchain, looking at blockchain as a technology to incorporate in civic infrastructure, what Estonia is doing. And Singapore has become really the epicenter for a lot of digital asset businesses when it comes to regulation, when it comes to providing them guidance in terms of what they need to do. So Singapore did really well in our previous wealth report as well. Where Singapore did exceptionally well is we at Multipolitan believe tax is just one part of the equation. Investors are seeking predictability over the next 5 to 10 year window. But what are investors looking for when it comes to the 15 to 20 year window? And I think what they're looking for is cities that are focused on climate action. That's cities that are digitally ready and the cities that are politically stable, right? And I think Singapore did really well on our Smart and Sustainable Cities Index because of that. Because, there's a lot of conversation about climate action. Singapore Green Plan 30, you have things like Marine Barrage, digitally extremely ready. If you look at the SingPass, you're able to access multiple public amenities through that. It's really a front runner when it comes to digital readiness. And I think these indicators are strong indicators, particularly for families to consider when they're looking at their wealth for the next 10, 15 years, because we are seeing changes of climate change. In California, it's impossible for you to get a house insurance because of these wildfires. So I think that's where Singapore did really, really well, which is a Smart and Sustainable Cities Index. So the bottom line is combining fiscal intelligence with climate action, with neutrality is where eventually the wealth is going to go.
Yeah, Nirbhay, wealth reports can provide the broad strokes, but founders, some of them might be listening in today, in fact, want or would like to hear some practical wisdom that they can apply in their day-to-day today in the immediate future in terms of planning, capital allocation, business relocation. Are there any actionable insights that they can glean from the report on that front?
Yeah, I think the number one is obviously entrepreneurs who are not based in UAE and Singapore. It's great to have an alternative residence in times like these, particularly in a place which is neutral, right? Because your business get impacted very radically, super quickly. So seeking an alternative residence is a great action plan. The second piece is you want to grow your startups in a fiscally competitive, still fiscally intelligent jurisdictions. So getting access to places like Abu Dhabi, Dubai, and Singapore can be a big positive. The third piece is you want to be part of a place where you can overcome talent shortages. And, lots changing in the last 3 to 5 years. We're seeing a tremendous interest around AI and businesses coming into that space. So being part of a country where they allow you to bring specialized talent can be a great weapon for entrepreneurship. And Singapore does that extremely well. And so does UAE. So I would say these are 3 key practical tips that founders can look at. And obviously, you have a great venture capital ecosystem here. The government provides a lot of supports to startups in Singapore. Our business is proudly Singapore headquartered for the same reason. So looking at a place where there is conducive startup ecosystem is again, very important. And Singapore does that very well.
All right. The Wealth Report 2025, a reminder that wealth today follows foresight and not just incentives. And Singapore's unique position shows how trust and stability and readiness for the future are becoming the true currencies of prosperity. Thank you so much for joining us, Nirbhay.
Thank you so much for having me. A pleasure.
Yeah, just to end off from one Multipolitan to another, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much. That was Nirbhay Handa, CEO of Multipolitan. Stay with Money FM 89.3.